Okay, so dear friends and colleagues from wherever in the world you join us today, good evening from Berlin. I'm delighted to welcome you here tonight to our online event with the title October 7th and the Holocaust. No, sorry, I don't start this today.
Oh,
Carolina will
you start and you
But you're
introduce.
doing so well.
Sorry for
Verena,
this.
you introduce Carolina. It's okay.
No,
It's
no,
okay.
no, 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 no. Sorry, this is the usual procedure. I mixed it up. We start again.
So I go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hello, from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Carolina Simon, the founding executive director of The Art of Humanity. The Art of Humanity is a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating anti-Semitism, Holocaust distortion, and promoting democratic values through the transformative power of education and the arts. We engage individuals in creative, historically grounded learning experiences that foster empathy, critical thinking, and moral courage. Moral courage, more so than anything else, seems to be the most lacking in current academic discourse, particularly among Holocaust educators in the West. This has led to a whitewashing of history, Holocaust inversion, and distortion, if not outright denial, and extremely misguided young people. We must all do better to shine a light on historical truth with critical thinking and moral courage as our compass. To learn more about us and our work, you can visit our website at theartofhumanity.org. We are excited to partner with Western Galilee College on this webinar today and hope to do so for many more projects to come. Dr. Verena Büttner is an associate researcher of the Holocaust Studies program at Western Galilee College in Israel, where she organizes its online lecture series. Since July 2025, she is a research associate of the Commissioner for Combating Anti-Semitism in the state of Brandenburg, Germany, Andreas Büttner, who is one of today's speakers, and his deputy. She has just begun a habilitation project at the University of Potsdam on German Jewish childhood from 1920 to 1945. Her research focuses on childhood during and after the Holocaust and Zionist Haksara and non-Zionist training for emigration. Dr. Büttner has received research grants and awards from the International Institute for Holocaust Research, Yad Vashem, the Joint Distribution Archives, the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture, the Hadassah Brandeis Institute, the Leo Baeck Institute, New York, and the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure. In 2016 and 17, she and Boaz Cohen founded the Children After War Holocaust and Genocide Project. And today, she is our distinguished moderator. So without further ado, Dr. Verena Büttner.
Yes, thank you, Carolina, for the introduction. I will start with my small speech again now. So, dear friends and colleagues from wherever in the world you join us today, good evening again from Berlin. I'm delighted to welcome you tonight to our online event with the title October 7th and the Holocaust. First, I wish to say thank you to you, Carolina, from the Art of Humanity for the warm and open collaboration today, but would also like to say thank you to Rivka Rosenberg, a leading expert in Holocaust education, educational technology, and foreign language teaching, who can unfortunately not be with us today. Although the war in Gaza has officially ended, we all know that the war is never truly over when it's officially over. To this day, Israeli bodies remain in Gaza, and Hamas has executed hundreds of opponents since the ceasefire began. For 2 years now, many circles seem to have forgotten the simple fact that the war in Gaza was triggered by the massacres and abductions carried out by Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Gazan civilians on October 7, 2023. In her widely acclaimed speech, I Cannot Imagine a World Without Israel, Nobel Prize-winning author Herta Müller claimed that on October 7th, Hamas had sought to recreate the Shoah in southern Israel. Indeed, the massacres of that day continue to be associated with the Holocaust on emotional, personal, political, and governmental levels around the world. even while the crimes were being committed or broadcasted, and the victims made, during the crimes, the victims made involuntary associations related to the Holocaust, as documented in numerous interview projects worldwide collecting their testimonies. Shortly after the massacres, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., published an open letter from Holocaust survivors, which states the following, and I quote, "Today, men, women, and children are once again being targeted simply for being Jewish. Today, we are witnessing the worst mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust," end quote. And as we all know, also foreigners were murdered and abducted to Gaza simply because they lived in the Jewish state. 2 days later, I had been in touch with a Holocaust child survivor with the name Miriam, originally from the Netherlands. Her granddaughter wrote to me, I quote her, "My grandmother's survival story has always sounded surreal, like something you could never imagine experiencing yourself. The more footage and stories that are released this week, the more you realize it's happening again," end quote. The impact of that day had manifold effects on emotional and social levels, which will also be felt in the diaspora. Finally, Israeli Holocaust researchers had raised the question of whether the October 7th massacres could be compared to the Holocaust. For example, Havi Dreyfus, Avinoam Pat, or Liat Steyer-Livni. Today, we have with us 6 colleagues here who are not primarily active with drawing comparisons or analogies between October 7th and the Holocaust, which was implemented from Europe to North Africa and the Middle East between 1933 and 1945. They are addressing issues related to the Holocaust in more general terms. Today, anti-Semitism and eliminatory anti-Zionism reached unprecedented heights. Generally speaking, the massacres as of October 7th represented a further escalation in terms of attacks on the memory of the Holocaust. It is abused and misused, downplayed, and attacked also among Holocaust and genocide scholars who frame the war in Gaza as genocide. Meanwhile, profiles from Gaza spread the message that their owners are Holocaust survivors. Having this said, I wish all of us an interesting event. And I would like to ask you, if you have any questions this evening, please put them in the chat and I will read out them later. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you, where is she? Hello. Dr. Tehila Darmon Malka, who heads the history department at Herzog Academic College in Jerusalem. Her doctoral thesis, Between Survivors and Victims, Missing Persons After the Holocaust, included multidisciplinary aspects in an attempt to point out the issue of missing persons as a significant aspect that greatly influenced the case of personal, social, and national rehabilitation after World War II. She completed her postdoctoral research as a Spiegel Fellow at the Finkler Institute of Holocaust Research at Bar Ilan, and she was a postdoc research fellow at the International Institute for Holocaust Research at Yad Vashem. In 2023, she was an Airy Crystal Fellow at the Wiener Holocaust Library in London. Her current research focuses on various aspects of fatherhood during the Holocaust. Since October 7th, she has also been volunteering at Edut, I cannot say the Hebrew numbers, Edut 710, Testimony 710, an archival project dedicated to collecting testimonies related to the October 7 attacks. Edut 710 was initiated promptly following the incidents. Its objective is to preserve the testimonies of those who experienced that day. And now, Tehila, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Verena. Thank you for inviting me. And I must say that I am very nervous, so I hope it will be okay. So as Verena represented me, I am an historian and I am also a volunteer in Edut 710, as we call it in Hebrew. And I want to share with you for the beginning my story, how I get there, and then from then to maybe elaborate a little bit about the connection between historians and collecting memory testimonies now. So I live in a small village in the south. I'm a religious woman, as you can see, if someone ignore it. And so when I woke up in 6:29 in October 7th, I didn't knew nothing, and as everyone here, but I heard very odd voices from the distance. I looked outside from my window. No storm was there. Nothing was there. So I couldn't understand why I hear this noise. But after a while, my house was shaken because something that after a while we understood that it was a missile that felt close to us. So we understand that something very bad is going on. And I sent my husband to go to ask some people what is going on. He came soon and he said, I don't know what is going on, but it seems that something bad is going around Gaza, in the periphery of Gaza, and maybe you should get up. I woke up because I am part of the emergency team in my community. So and we need to step forward in emergency events, and this is clearly was an emergency because few hours later, most of the men in my community went out because the army called them, and we left in our community just women, children, and the elderly. So it was a little bit scary. I remind you, we live in a house, but we handled this day. But when Shabbat or the Chag went out and we were plugged in to the internet, we understood that it is a catastrophe. The names were gathered together. People that we knew just didn't stop to come. People that we heard that were murdered and kidnapped, and it was horrible. And in this day, like everybody in Israel, we just was in shock, totally shock. But a few days after that, when I learned how to breathe again, I realized, or I remembered, that beside me being an Israeli, I am also an historian. And this is a very important thing in my self identity, and I need to use my ability as historian to do something. So I try to figure out what can I do, and then I heard about a group of people that started to collect testimonies. So I jumped in, and since then I'm 2 years in Edut 710. That now I want to share with you what we are doing. So this is me. We are going to places to all around where the people are, and we take their testimonies. This is as you can see, with camera, we come there and we collect their testimonies. This, for example, is from Ofakim. This is Ella Chaimi. Her husband is still in Gaza. His body is still a hostage. He is an hostage in Gaza. So this is Edut 710 is an organization that put that his target is to collect testimonies from all the people that were in October 7th in the events. I want to share with you a little. Tell me if you can see or hear. And
אנחנו מעדות 710.
תספר מה שאתה רוצה.
רציתי לבקש מדן שישתמש בנשק עליי. שלא ייתן להם לקחת אותי, אבל לא יכול. הוא עייף.
כשהבן שלי שאל אותי, אבא, יהיה בסדר? אנחנו נהיה בסדר? לא אמרתי לו, יהיה בסדר.
הייתי בטוחה שכולם מתים, שהילדים שלי מתים. כאילו לא ידעתי שיש אופציה לצאת מזה בחיים.
ובשלב מסוים זורקים פנימה רימוני רסס לתוך המיגונית. במהלך כל הריצה, פעם אחת לא הסתכלתי אחורה. זה דמות מולי. ממש שברי שנייה. אז הוא מסתכל עליי, פתח עליי באש. לאוקטובר, הפסקתי להיות בן אדם פרטי. אבל אם הפכתי להיות חלק מההיסטוריה של מדינת ישראל, לפחות בזה תרמתי משהו.
הסיפור הזה, מה לעשות? שהוא לא ישכח לרגע.
so עדות 710, as you can see, is an organization that collects testimonies from all people that was in the October 7th around Gaza, around the Gaza Strip. And the main issue is to preserve these testimonies and to create an archive, an historical archive. So people can use it in the future. Until today, we have 1,700 testimonies.
Wow.
And we took him from all around. As you can see, these are the numbers of the testimonies from the places. For example, tomorrow I will go to Be'er Sheva, so it won't be 1, it will be 5, because tomorrow we are going to collect 4 more testimonies. So this is what we are doing, and this is what I'm doing. And the question of the connection between me being an historian and me being a volunteer in Edut 710 is something that bother me or make me think about the importance of historians in these events, or what we as historians can do in such a crucial event. So in the few minutes I have left, now I'm going back to my pages. In the few minutes I have left, I would like to look up from the technical issues of collecting, preserving, documenting the testimonies, which relate more to the practice of establishing an archive of testimonies, and to wonder about the totality. My choice to join Edut 710 stemmed directly from being an historian. As someone who engaged in my professional life in remembering, documenting, and commemorating one of the greatest catastrophic events new to the Jewish people, I felt that I must go do something today. The first thing I wondered about on my way on one of the hotels in Eilat that people were evacuated to 2 weeks after October 7th was the question of what historians do when catastrophe occurs. This is a question that I am certainly not the first to ask. In fact, contrary to the idea that historians are required to wait until the appropriate perspective is formed, each one defines it differently, historians have always documented their concrete time. Thus, for example, we can see Josephus Flavius documenting distant Jewish history, and at the same time, he writes the story of Masada. And if we jump forward, so does Emanuel Ringelblum, the historian who documents the Warsaw Ghetto and the death of the ghetto, which will also lead to his own death. Ringelblum, like his teacher Dubnov, believed that the role of history is to serve the people by exposing the diverse and different internal forces that exist within it, and by connecting to the general environment. Dubnov, who sent his students to gather information about the Jewish life in Poland, was somewhat of the inspiration for his student to continue collecting the testimonies even as the sky darkened. Ringelblum saw the creation of the archive as a tool of combat the German attempt to eliminate what is happening. And although at the beginning he didn't imagine that the end of the glorious Jewish community of Warsaw would be annihilation, through the end of 1942, the end began to become clear to him. And the importance of the archive that he helped build together with his friend grew even stronger. Did Ringelblum and the Oneg Shabbat archive aim at future historians, or they trying to establish the collective national memory? It is not clear to me how Ringelblum would. I think that maybe. Okay. It is not clear to me how Ringelblum would have answered this question, because the separation between history and collective memory or communal memory was only defined by historians in the 70s. One of the early key works in the debate between memory and history was the thin but influential book by historian Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi. In his book Zachor, Yerushalmi presents his view of Jewish memory and how it was changed with the modern era, including the rise of history as a modern discipline. According to him, the Jewish people have maintained their memory through their history. Remembrance is a core and vital value in the Jewish life, and many mitzvot, law, and practices are designed to preserve it. Jewish memory focuses on past events, but its preservation does not aim to keep the event itself alive. Instead, it carried the important value and teaching that form its core. Yerushalmi explained that Chazal, the ancient smart people, believe that God is revealed through past events, and therefore the obligation to remember these events comes from the idea that it is the way to connect with God. In the Middle Ages, another idea emerged, that the past was source of inspiration or preservation or perceptions, representing a turning wheel in the world during time of crisis. Recalling past events provided comfort and gave them meaning. For example, lamentation about the crusade were added to lamentation of Tisha B'Av and the destruction of the temple. According to it, When the modern era began, there was a strong fight between Jewish memory and modern historians. The historians believe in recording history as it is, without adding any judgment or meaning. But I should mention that some people or some researchers disagreed with Yerushalmi. They argued that history is often shaped by ideas and beliefs. And even today, history helps create common story of communities. They referred to works by Halbach, Anderson, and others. Another person who distinguished between history and memory alongside Yerushalmi was Pierre Nora. According to him, as history became almost the sole barrier of memory for the past, and a gap emerged between history and memory, realms of memory began to emerge. Places, texts, symbols, etc. that essentially record not only to events that occurred, but also the different meaning that society assigned to the event and what shaped the national memory, that shaped the national memory. In light of this, the separation between history and collective memory, I want to revisit Edut 710, the website, YouTube channel, and the digital archive, and to see whether they serve as a realm of memory, or if they are mainly designed to create tools and information for future researchers to write history as accurately as possible. In fact, these words already reveals the dilemmas we face in creating such a database. If the goal from the beginning is to build a comprehensive archive of testimonies with professional and ethical standards that will serve as a national database, then uniformed rules and norms must be established for collecting testimonies. However, there is also the desire to provide a safe space and time for witnesses to tell their stories in their own way. In other words, while aiming for a consistent format with a standard structure, the top priority in the narrative, the top priority that we are put in front of our eyes in Edut 710 is a narrative the witnesses choose to share. It is a witness's story that matters most, and it will be respected. As documentarians, we will not ask them to touch on sensitive or uncomfortable topics they prefer not to. The perception of the testimonies as a story that the witness wants to share aligned with Dori Laub's approach, which aimed to build a connection between the witness and the listener, and to emphasize the importance of being present for the witnesses. I would like to suggest that the importance of such project for future historians is, I would like to suggest that the importance of such project for future historians is undeniable. This is a very, very important project, and for the future, people will need it to learn what really happened. But it is also can be seen like a monument, a place of remembrance, a digital memorial site where all witnesses can lay down their memories and to share them with the public. Will it be possible to learn anything from this? Will it be possible to learn something from it in the future? I believe yes. I believe that by connecting a number of testimonies together, or thanks to projects that bring community together, it will certainly be possible to learn about what happened to places and communities. But I believe that as of today, the main importance of documentation is the creation of a space of memory, a digital monumental that has its strength in it because it's left of hierarchy, personal and individual. Lack of hierarchy, and it's personal and individual. In my observation, if my observation is correct, and you can of course disagree with me, I would like to argue that Edut 710, which initially aimed to maintain historical archive, was also become a memorial site or a place of individual memory. I want to share with you the
Tehila, you have to come to a close. One more minute.
Okay, so I want to end with this short thing that you can see that people explain why they want to give their testimonies, and I think that it connects my thing together.
בא לי לבוא, כן לתת את העדות שלי. סיבה אחת גם עיקרית, שיהיה להם אחרי שהיא סיימה את העדות פה איתכם ביחד, אשתי חזרה לחיים. לא משנה כמה טיפולים, כמה שיחות שהיא עשתה, אחרי הרעיון שלכם, אשתי חזרה להיות ילם, אימא, ילם, אישה.
לספר את הסיפור הזה, זה באיזשהו מקום זה מנקה, זה עושה טוב.
זה מפליא אותי לא זלגו לי פה המון דמעות ושבאמת הצלחתי לדבר, האמת שזאת הפעם הראשונה שזה קורה, שאני ככה מדבר ואומר את זה בשטף.
אני אפילו רועדת כשאני מספרת, אבל אני עושה את זה בשביל ההמשך.
סבא שלי ניצול שואה. אין לי מושג מה עבר עליו בתחושותיו. אני יודע על הנייר. תחושותיו ואין לי מושג, הוא לא דיבר את זה אף פעם, אז אני יודע את הדרך שהוא עבר, אבל אני לא יודע מה הוא הרגיש.
אני לא רציתי בהתחלה, אבל המטפלת שלי אמרה לי שיש לזה גם ערך בשבילי, של לבוא ולספר את זה.
צריך להקדיש את כל העדות והכל בעצם לשלושה אנשים שהיו האנשים הכי קרובים אליי, ובעצם לא שרדו את היום הזה, הם שלושתם נהרגו בהגנה על הקיבוצים שלהם.
מתוך עולם ההסברה, אני מכירה את מול מה אנחנו מתמודדים. כמות ההכחשה והשקרים בעולם וכן הלאה. אז גם מהצד הזה מאוד מאוד חשוב לתת עדות שלי, בו אני הייתי שם, שזה יהיה מתועד הדבר הזה. שאף פעם לא נשכח ולא ישכחו מה עברנו.
So to collect all the things that I try to say is that I believe that the Edut 710 and not just us, there are a lot of organizations. I think that they are important for historians in the future, but it's also a memory. It's create the collective memory. It helps the people to understand what they have been through. And I believe that it can help people maybe in the future and maybe now even to move forward. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Tehila, for your work, your efforts, and that you shared your work with us today. And I think it would be amazing if you share the link to Edut in the chat also, because I think it's an obligation that also we who listen today share it. As
Of course.
this one person said, survivor said, there's so much denial and lies in the world. So thank you again. And now I will lead over to our next speakers, and different to what was announced on our flyer. We have 3 speakers now. I start with Professor Nitza Davidovitch, who is a scholar of the Education Department at Ariel University in Israel, where she is the head of the Innovation in Teaching and Learning Authority. Moreover, she is the head of the Israeli Forum of Centers for the Promotion of Teaching in Israel. Her research fields include higher education, academic curriculum development, Holocaust awareness and Jewish identity, and last but not least, the issue of moral education. Then we have Dr. Amir Mashiac, who is a senior lecturer and assistant professor at Ariel University at the Department of Israel Heritage. And last but not least is Dr. Alexandra Gerkerova, who is a researcher in the Education Department at Ariel University too. She earned her PhD in Pedagogical Sciences in June 2011 in Yalta, Crimea. Her dissertation titled The Ideas of Family Education on the Basis of Jewish Ethnopedagogics reflects her long-standing interest in Jewish culture and education. Dr. Gerkerova has extensive experience in education, having taught English and Jewish literature at the Jewish school Tikva or Sameach, and served as an assistant professor in the Department of Germanic Philology and Methodology of Foreign Languages, teaching at South Ukrainian National Pedagogical University. She was the director of the Israeli Cultural Center of South Ukrainian National Pedagogical University, supported by the Embassy of Israel in Ukraine from 2009 to 2013. She has also contributed to academia as a member of the organizing committee and editorial board of the Open International Scientific Forum and its journal, Modern Tendencies in Pedagogical Education and Science of Ukraine and Israel. Currently, Dr. Gerkerova is a member of the editorial board of the International Journal of Ethnopedagogy. Her research interests include Jewish ethnopedagogics, international educational collaboration, and innovative approaches in pedagogy. And now, Nitza, Amir, and Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm Alexandra. Nice to meet you all, colleagues. So I will share our presentation. We have prepared, okay, one moment, please. Okay, can you see our presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So, to tell the truth, I'm new to Israel. I came originally from Ukraine because of the war. My father was a Holocaust survivor, as well as my grandparents. So the story of the Holocaust is my own personal story of my family. And also now, when after my repatriation, all this tragedy of October 7 happened in Israel. And so it's also my personal story. But I'm first of all a teacher, and together with Professor Nitza and Dr. Amir, we have thought about the pedagogical view on what has happened and is still happening. in Israel. And, we started this research in 2023, soon after October 7, and it still continues today. And now that all our hostages have returned home and their testimonies have been made public, we can start first in history to speak about it in the past tense. And yet, this trauma that inflicted our people still remains painfully present. The wound is still open, and the icky continues to shape our collective consciousness. So this presentation focuses on the pedagogical dimension, how to responsibly teach what is going on now, what is living trauma, how to address difficult comparisons between Hamas and the Nazis, how to support teachers and students in engaging testimonies that are still raw, real, and deeply human. So we will discuss dilemmas, present authentic voices, and offer research-based recommendations for teaching these testimonies within Israeli education system. So October 7, 2023 marked the beginning of the new kind of testimony in Israel, testimony of hostages released from Gaza. These accounts are immediate, they are still raw, but this makes them very different from Holocaust testimonies, which entered the education systems only the decades after being examined, being verified, framed with historical and pedagogical context. For teachers, this creates unique challenge. So how to work with testimonies that are not yet part of the history, but still unfolding in real life. While educational tools do exist, they were not designed for this specific situation, and educators are now searching for the new forms and new approaches. The task is to respect the voices of witnesses that are at the same time creating a safe, responsible, and meaningful learning environment for students. So at the core of this issue, we have several central questions, which are both historical and pedagogical ones. So the first question is the one that students often raise directly: are Hamas Nazis? This comparison appears in political speeches, in the media, and sometimes also in the testimonies of the hostages themselves. The challenge for education is not to give quick or simple answers, but to help the students understand both the similarities and essential differences. The second question comes from the hostages themselves. How do they themselves define their own identity? Some describe their experience as Holocaust, others reject the term, prefer to call themselves terror survivors. This creates a profound dilemma. Should education mirror self-definition, or should it bring to a broader historical perspective? So here we have the story of Bella Haim, a Holocaust survivor from Poland. Now she's a resident of Kibbutz Gvulot. And she connects her past experiences with the events of October 7th from memory and language. Her grandson, Diotin, who was later unfortunately killed in Gaza, sent her a final message describing the burning houses around him and his fear of suffocation. Hearing these words, Bella said that she immediately thought about the Holocaust, of burning towns that she remembered from her childhood. Her testimony reveals now, in the moment of crisis, the memories of earlier traumas, and it reflects how individual experience and collective memory intertwine, shaping the way people perceive and give meaning to contemporary tragedy. Next slide shows us the testimony of Reuven Rosenblatt, the Holocaust survivor from Kfar Maimon, that also reflects about his past shaped on response of October 7. He recalls being prepared, having food, water, and even small means of defense, habits that were formed from the experience of scarcity and fear during the Holocaust. His words illustrate how survival patterns can persist for a lifetime, becoming a part of person's instinctive response to danger. For educators, his testimony raises important question. How does long-term memory influence present behavior? And how can such experiences help us to discuss resilience, preparedness, transmission of trauma through generations? Next slide. We can say that associations with the Holocaust are inevitable. And people do it both emotionally and historically. And the language of horror, fear, pain naturally arises when people try to describe what is indescribable. And even those who survived through October 7 emphasize that these are two different tragedies. Mia Sham, who endured unspeakable suffering, compares her experience to the Holocaust, but she does it not to equate the two, but to express the magnitude of hatred she faced simply for being Jewish. At the same time, voices of Eli Sharabi and Elia Cohen remind us that the context is fundamentally different. Israel exists, rescue was possible, survivors are not voiceless, and they witnesses within real living nation. This tension between resemblance and difference is what makes these testimonies also pedagogically vital. It invites education and students to explore how trauma echoes for generations, but transforms in meanings as it enters new historical realities. So, the question of survival identity moved from moral reflection and moral perspective to pedagogical reality as well. When testimonies filled with Holocaust associations enter the classroom, educations must decide how to approach them. Because we have to answer the question, should these parallels be addressed openly, helping students understand why they arise, or should they be handled with restraint to preserve the historical distinctiveness of each tragedy? Such choices require sensitivity. The goal is not to separate these memories completely, but to understand why such analogies emerge, how they can be addressed responsibly in the classroom. By guiding this process thoughtfully, teachers can transform emotional responses into this ethical understanding, encouraging empathy in what is informed rather than impulsive. When we speak about comparisons, we cannot just throw the words Holocaust, October 7 into the same sentence and leave it as that. Students hear these connections everywhere, in media, in politics, in classroom, and they need to slow down. So the model we suggest begins with the context. We ask, what does it even mean to compare? When it is legitimate, when does it cross the line? And then we listen to different voices, a testimony from the hostages, a testimony from Holocaust survivors, human beings speaking from two very different moments in history, put this side by side, and it doesn't mean that they say that it's all the same. It means showing the student how memory works, how trauma works. And after comes discussion, what is similar, what is different, what can be learned from both. And these are questions that give us space. And it's our way to avoid slogans. And finally, we close with values because we respect the witnesses, we respect the Holocaust survivors, we care in how we use their words. And the understanding that testimony is not just about the past, it is how we choose to live and how we choose to remember today. Okay, next slide. So in practice, teachers need very concrete things, the tools. So something it helps them to do responsibly with such painful things. And one of the most effective ways to start is comparison metrics. It is not about comparing pain and to compare sufferings, but it is a framework that helps students organize their thinking. They look at aspects like time, historical context, nature of the threat, and through this process, we learn to see both that connect and what separates the testimonies of Holocaust survivors and those of October 7th. It gives us structure when emotions can easily take over, and it helps teachers to move to the discussion and feeling of understanding. And our powerful approach is multiple voice technique. When they bring together the testimonies of different people, so it is a dialogue. And then there is a controlled empathy map. This tool helps students connect emotionally, but without losing their critical awareness. They listen, they imagine, and they also learn to step back, to reflect, and to ask questions. So what does this teach me about humanity, about resilience, about responsibility? So it is empathy that leads to reflection. Sure, none of these methods can fully solve the dilemmas teachers face every day talking about these painful things, but they provide a structure, a way to transform shock and grief into learning. Okay. So when they bring such testimonies into the classroom, they face not only methodological, but also ethical challenge. First, we must always respect for the witnesses. These words are not just material for a lesson, they are lived experiences. We have to protect their dignity. Second, accuracy is essential. Testimonies may contain contradictions, they may contain strong emotions, but teachers need to help students distinguish between the fact, interpretation, and opinion. This is part of our teaching responsibility. Third, we have to consider the psychological impact on students. These stories are close, they are painful, they are not easy to process. Teachers should be attentive to signs of distress to create in the classroom the atmosphere in which students can be safe. And finally, there is a risk of exploitation. We must be careful not to use trauma as a dramatic effect, but to handle it as a serious subject that calls sensitivity and care. These challenges remind us that teaching testimonies is about ethics, responsibility, and protection. One of the most sensitive issues is how to handle memory journeys. For years, Israeli schools have organized trips to Poland to sites like Auschwitz as a part of Holocaust education. Now the question arises, should also journeys be made to Be'eri, near Oz, or Faraza, the communities that were most affected on October 7th? This also raises more dilemmas. If we add new sites of memory, do they exist alongside with the traditional ones? Do they risk replacing them? How do we make sure that visiting such places does not trivialize or commercialize the memory instead of deepens the students' understanding? There is also a broader civic question. Should October 7th become part of civic education, not only history? That would mean framing it not only as trauma, but also the lesson about democracy, responsibility, and resilience. These are not very simple questions, but they show how education is always at the intersection of history, society, and values. The way we answer them will shape the next generation, understanding both past and present. So Holocaust education in Israel has been developed for years. Teachers have received systematic training, clear methods, clear resources. By contrast, October 7 created an urgent need for a new kind of teacher training, the one that has to be built almost immediately. Teachers now face challenges their predecessors did not. They must work with the testimonies that are fresh, and they may have to deal with the images or videos that are difficult to watch, with the students who feel very personal connections to the event. This means that teacher training cannot only focus on the content, it should prepare teachers to go with their own emotions, their own reactions, to recognize the signs of distress among the students, and to manage sensitive discussions in the classroom. Supported teachers is not optional. It's the condition for making sure that memory education remains respectful and suitable in the long term. To turn ideas into practice, we need to think on 3 levels: the system, the school, and the teacher. At the system level, it means developing the age-appropriate curriculum from grades from 8 to 12, creating professional archive of testimonies, building partnerships with institutions like trauma treatment centers and Yad Vashem. At the school level, we need multidisciplinary teams, teachers, counselors, psychologists, who can support both students and the staff. Schools also should involve parents, so families can be the part of the process of preparation and support. And at the teacher level, the focus is on ongoing training. Teachers need tools to recognize signs of distress, how to manage sensitive discussions, and to create safe and respectful atmosphere in the classroom. Implementation is not like adding content to the curriculum. It is about creating support structures so that both students and teachers can engage with testimonies responsibly and constructively. So alongside with teaching practice, there are important questions for research. First, how does exposure to live testimonies influence the identity of the adolescents? Does it shape the way they see themselves and place themselves in the society? Second, what is the difference between the Holocaust testimonies and those of October 7 in terms of educational effect? Holocaust testimonies have been part of collective memory for decades, while October 7 is something that is going on now. Comparing the impact can help understanding how memory works across time. And the third question is about resilience. Can engaging with the testimonies help students develop coping skills, empathy, and strength? Or does it increase vulnerability? And finally, how do classroom discussions about survivor identity, where someone is a Holocaust survivor, terror survivor, or simply a person who lived through trauma, affect students themselves? This question shows that education here is not only about transmitting knowledge, but also about shaping identity, and also about values. And more research can help us refine pedagogy and give teachers better guidance. So as we conclude, it's important to make one thing clear. We cannot put an equal sign between October 7 and the Holocaust. These are fundamentally different historical traumas and fundamentally different human contexts. In case of October 7, there is a sovereign state, the army, the society that stands behind its citizens. The hostages were evaded at home, and this home still exists. The events are tragic, but they are part of the living and ongoing national history. The Holocaust, on the other hand, represents a total collapse of protection, time when they had no home, no state, no defense. It is a singular event in the human history. That's why our task is not to compare suffering, trauma, tragedies, but to understand how each story shapes us as Israeli citizens, how it shapes values, responsibility, in their own way. Education must help students hold these differences together, to see both the pain and resilience, danger and hope, without confusion or simplification. Thanks a lot for attention.
Dear Alexandra, thank you so much for this lecture. I just saw your colleagues already shared the links. There are already some questions, but I will come back to them after our fourth speaker. So thank you again.
Thank
But
you.
you can see our article. We put it here.
Sorry?
You can see our article.
Yes, exactly. So this is what I meant. Your colleagues, you shared the links to the articles.
Yeah.
But we will now go further with our third speaker. I already heard him in Potsdam, but I'm really curious to listen to it again because it's really interesting. This is Dr. Lev Topor, who is a policy-oriented researcher and private consultant in the fields of anti-Semitism, cybersecurity, and intelligence. Lev is the head of cybersecurity studies and teachers at the School of Information Systems at the Academic College at Tel Aviv, Israel. Lev is a former visiting fellow, Institute for the Study of Global Antisemitism fellow at the Wolf Institute in Cambridge, United Kingdom, and a former senior research fellow at the Center for Cyber Law and Policy at the University of Haifa, also in Israel, of course. And he's also a former visiting scholar at the International Institute for Holocaust Research in Yad Vashem. Lev published numerous peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, and reports on cyber policies and anonymous communications, racism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism. Dr. Topor has been a keynote speaker and an expert consultant to the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the European Commission, the OSCE, and other entities. He has published 3 books. He co-authored a book published in 2021 with the title, Why Do People Discriminate Against Jews? Recently, Lev also published a book with Routledge titled Fishing for Nazis, Conspiracies and Anonymous Communications and White Supremacy Networks on the Dark Web. And in 2024, he released his latest book titled Cyber Sovereignty, International Security, Mass Communication, and the Future of the Internet, which describes and predicts the future structure of the Internet. The book is a part of the renowned Global Power Shift series. And now, please, Lev, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this warm and kind introduction. I hope you all can see the slide. Can you just, tell me if you can see the slides? Okay, wonderful. So today we heard about the importance to remember the Holocaust and the importance to take and document whatever we can to remember it. But my presentation is about something a bit different but related. Who and why denies all of what we now gather and gathered in the past, and what are the personal, geopolitical, and other reasons to deny the Holocaust and to deny October 7th. So today's lecture is titled Denial as a Strategy, Holocaust Denial, Terrorism Denial, and the Continuity of Anti-Semitism. And for today's lecture, I'm asking fairly simple questions. Why do some people minimize or reject factual accounts of terrorist atrocities? And the same, of course, goes to the Holocaust. Why do some minimize or reject the factual accounts of the Holocaust? It's the same question about 2 different events. I'm also asking, how will October 7th be remembered? Because at the back of your head, you should also keep in mind that we also ask ourselves, how do we remember the Holocaust? Maybe not we as this group now who is aware, but we as society, as humanity, as everybody in their own country. How do we, in general, remember the Holocaust? and how terrorism denial and Holocaust denial actually promote anti-Semitism. And to begin this lecture, I can show you a recent example of a Telegram channel that actually spreads anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories. And you can read the line that follows along the images in this Telegram channel. So the line reads as such, and I quote, "They lied about Hitler's crematoriums for 80 years, right? And now they will, and they continue to describe other things, okay? So the context is October 7th, the current war, but yet whoever is behind this Telegram channel, which has thousands and thousands of subscribers and views, says they lied about Hitler's crematorium. Now the authors of this post use the word they. Who are they? They is of course the Jews in the conspiratorial mindset of whoever wrote it. Now, to follow this, I will show a few other examples, right? But before my examples, I must note that this presentation is based, at least partly, on a recent study I published in Israel Affairs titled Terrorism Denial, 710 and the Reasons to Deny a Pogrom. So if you want to see all of the examples and so on, you can refer to the article. It is, of course, open access. So we have many examples on social media denying the Holocaust. Okay, and I will just go for denying October 7th, sorry. And I will just go from left to right, right? A username named Halisi, she writes, huge October 7th expose, largest media scandal exposed. Now this is on X. Another one on TikTok says Israel lied about civilian casualties on October 7th. Okay, look at the rhetoric, civilian casualties. Now, he doesn't say Israel lied about everything, but about the civilian casualties. The other example is from YouTube. Again, somebody telling that it was all lies and made up. Another one is from Telegram. Again, the same group, Lord of War. And another one is from X again. Okay, so we have a trend here in social media. And if you just go ahead and type on X, on YouTube, on Telegram, October 7th and lies, you will see all of these posts and much more. So you might think, okay, these are fringe users, fringe websites. No, they have thousands and even hundreds of thousands of views to their posts. Now, another example, right, is from the Global Resist News Telegram channel, which is fairly strongly, I would suggest, affiliated to Hamas. And look at what they write. Hamas didn't attack USS Liberty. Hamas didn't sink SS Patricia. Hamas didn't steal uranium. Hamas didn't kill JFK. Hamas didn't aid 9/11. Hamas wasn't ISIS Air Force, and so on and so on. Hamas doesn't own the media. And they go on to follow and write, despite Hamas having committed 0 war crimes and 0 atrocities, Jews, again, I emphasize that Jews, it's not Israelis, it's Jews. Jews want you to believe that they have been the victims of the worst nightmares you could ever imagine, right? So there's a trend here. It's not just about denying October 7th or saying that Israel invented it, lied about it. It's taking pretty much every other conspiracy that is out there and associating it to Jews, saying, well, Hamas didn't do this and that, right? But who did it? Well, it says the Jews. Jews want you to believe, right? Now, in many social media posts, you probably can see memes or texts associating the Holocaust with the now debunked thing, debunked news, I would say, about the 40 beheaded babies. Okay, now why do so many anti-Semites, Holocaust deniers, and October 7th deniers place these together. They want the debunked news about the 40 beheaded babies to be associated psychologically with the Holocaust. And if it is psychologically associated, so many people that are unaware of the history and the facts, and they just consume social media, they might do the connection in their head that if something was debunked, then the other thing should be a lie as well, right? And the lady from the famous TV series says at the bottom of the script of the meme, they're the same picture. Now, in another very large group called BMW, the Bureau of Mimetic Warfare on Telegram, they write, the same people that lied about 40 beheaded babies also lied about the Holocaust. It's the same conceptual lie. Now, we can see it again and again, and it's not just on Telegram, it's all over. So this one is from X. Okay, so Stu Peters says, you're not going to cancel me. I will always adapt my message. He goes on and on and on. He also gives his promo code to sell off his books and nonsense and so on. And he posts a video denying the Holocaust, completely denying the Holocaust, denying gas chambers and so on. He's sort of a media influencer in the field of Holocaust deniers, I would say. But Stop Genocide, right? The person probably named Muhammad Burgov 1, that's his username, who calls himself Stop Genocide, writes, we saw how much the Jews lied about October 7. He recalls the lies about 40 beheaded babies, or babies in the ovens, or mass rapes, and so on. He goes on and on and on to talk about media and technology, and then he writes, why then would we believe the Jewish version of World War II and the Holocaust? So the debate from the perspectives of anti-Semites is very much related. And they ask themselves, well, maybe the Holocaust was a lie, maybe October 7th was a lie, and maybe it's Israel and maybe it's the Jews who are behind it, going back to the ancient tropes of Jewish global conspiratorial manipulations and media control and warmongering and so on and so on. So you might think that it's only on Telegram and fringe media accounts on X and so on, but no, it's actually in websites as well, and semi-official websites. So the website that appears to be blue with the title, Israel lied about what happened at October 7th Music Festival to justify genocide, and they quote, of course, Hamas. It is a Turkish network, semi-official network, the AA. Okay, and in Memo, the Middle East Monitor, you can see that Dr. Mustafa Faturi writes, and I've put the little red arrow to help guide us. He writes, since old habits die hard, if they ever do, Israel's habits of lying is part of its short history of 75 years. So again, he refers to October 7th as a lie, and he also refers to the Holocaust as a lie. Now, let's put the Holocaust aside for a second. What was actually Hamas trying to do? What is Hamas trying to do? Well, in fact, when you analyze it, you see that they have a dual media strategy. So what do they employ? So you see that they promote it and they deny it simultaneously. Okay, and I'll just share with you how I came to it. So the day of the attack, I woke up early morning, went downstairs from my apartment, and suddenly I heard sirens. I went to the shelter and so on, and I opened my device, my phone, and I look at all the Telegram channels because I follow them for research. And I see all the Hamas propaganda being spread. They recorded and live streamed and published whatever they did. All the atrocities You can just see it. It's not fake. It's not made with AI. It's just out there. Okay. So they used it to intimidate. Later on, they used it to recruit and to radicalize others, spread the atrocities, and so on, to instill fear in Israel and abroad. But on the other hand, I'm holding my phone and I'm scrolling to other Telegram channels, and I see the complete opposite. Whatever I just saw, I see those who are behind the Telegram channels completely erasing it and denying it. They reframe it as resistance, but not only. They also downplay it. They downplay the atrocities. They shift the blame. They say that Hamas didn't start the attack. They say that the attack did not happen at all. Okay, and it happens simultaneously, just one following the other. It's not even a day after. It's live simultaneously. Okay, and this got me wondering, why do they do it? Okay, so coming up to analyzing many examples, I came up to a certain conclusion, or a bucket list, if you will, right? Which is similar in the case of October 7th, and it is in the case of the Holocaust denial. So why do Hamas deny the October 7th attack, and why do anti-Semites, Holocaust deniers, Nazis, Islamists, and so on, why do all of them deny the Holocaust as well, right? So first they want, so we know that there's hard denial and soft denial, right? Hard denial is claiming that nothing ever happened. It's all made up, right? Soft denial is downplaying the severity of the attacks. It's saying, okay, there was an attack, but there wasn't as many civilian casualties, or Hamas didn't target civilian casualties, and so on. It's saying, okay, it's a war. People fought each other, but it wasn't a terrorist attack. Rapes did not occur. Children were not being killed, murdered, and so on and so on. So this is soft denial, right? So what did they try to do, in fact? They try to gather legitimacy, to present themselves not as terrorists, but as resistant fighters, and to delegitimize the Israeli self-defense mechanism. Because if you think about it, and you say, okay, Hamas did attack, so what does this mean? It means that Israel has the right for self-defense. Well, they obviously didn't want this to happen. They wanted to continue and delegitimize Israel, so they kept lying about it. And they also wanted to avoid condemnation, legal and political backlash. So they didn't want to be the bad guy. They started as a bad guy, but soon enough they wanted to be presented as the victims. And with all the ICJ process and all of the anti-Israeli and I would say anti-Semitic propaganda globally, they even managed in some aspect to get what they wanted, to be seen as the victim. It's called shifting the blame shifting. And lastly, they also wanted to recruit, to use their propaganda for radicalization, to radicalize others inside the Gaza Strip and around Judea, Samaria area, to do the same, maybe, but also to recruit others in Europe, in the US, and to radicalize them into taking action. Now, this is all, of course, backed up by many examples, too many examples. And interestingly, if you look at the second column in this table, I try to ask myself, what's the main trend of this denial? And I can see that while from other research on Holocaust denial, I know that those who deny the Holocaust, mainly the neo-Nazi factions, they often engage in hard denial, or at least semi. These who denied the October 7th attack didn't they didn't engage in hard denial. They engaged almost entirely in soft denial. Okay, so they didn't say, okay, the attack was entirely made up. They said the civilian casualties were made up, the babies and the rape and so on. Okay, if you look at the elements of denial in the table on your left, you can see the exact types. Okay, questioning death tolls or intentionality, framing events as justified response to threats, portraying atrocities as unintended consequences, similar to Holocaust denial. A lot of neo-Nazis say, okay, that's what goes on at wars, right? People die, so it was unintentional. And challenging the reliability of evidence. We know all of this from examples like the Lochter report, right, on the gas chambers. Attempting to absolve perpetrators, of course, shifting the blame, becoming the victims, manipulating historical narratives, and so on, and so on. Okay, and some, well, not just quite a few, but many, unfortunately, don't just do hard denial. They don't do soft denial. They also do justification. They dishonor the victim's memory. In one, it was published in the Daily Mail, by the way, in a video that says that somebody went through a rally supporting Israel and laughed at them and said, "Are you people dead yet?" Oh, good. As a response to a description of the 7/10 attack. And many, of course, many celebrities, if you will, from academia and also from the music industry and so on, they also refuse to believe this. Okay, we have Norman Finkelstein, we have Roger Waters, who says that there's something fishy, something made up about the atrocities. Okay, of course, you saw the example of Max Blumenthal as well. Ilan Pepe, the famous sociologist, who was a member at the Haifa University, of course, and long gone from Israel, and so on. And entities and networks, right? The gray zone, the electronic intifada, Mundovice, all of these radical left magazines and websites and so on, all of them deny, and all of them not just deny, but they also deny October 7th in the context of the Holocaust. They often claim that those who made things up about the Holocaust also make false flag operations for Israel, for Jewish manipulations, and so on, and so on. Okay, so what in fact is the conspiratorial mindset? Okay, what do they think for themselves? Obviously, they don't think, but that's that's for us to discuss here, to say here. But in reality, they actually believe that while consuming all of these media artifacts and disinformation online and anti-Semitic propaganda and so on, they actually believe that there's a Jewish manipulation out there. That denial for them is rooted in anti-Semitic tropes. So if they believe that Jews are greedy, want to control the media, the wars, finances, and so on, they will also probably believe that October 7th was made up, and they also would believe that the Holocaust was made up by Jews, of course, right? And they also engage in their mind in victim blaming. Some claim that victims fabricated or exaggerated. So, for instance, in the case of the Holocaust, many neo-Nazis back then and even now claim that many victims wanted to get funding from the German government in the 50s and 60s, and from social care in Israel and so on. So they actually faked all of it, and now they claim the same. So that people want to become victims in Israel to get certain financial or social benefits and so on. Okay, and they actually blame the victims for it. Okay, and if you compare it to cases of, for instance, right, also horrible cases of rape, for instance, it's the same analogy. And lastly, the moral equivalence. is that denial diminishes uneven power dynamics between terrorists and civilians. Okay, so now we don't really know, globally speaking, we don't really know who's the victim and who's the aggressor. Now, to conclude this, if we compare the Holocaust denial, of course, not the Holocaust. If we compare Holocaust denial to terrorism denial, we see that there's so much similarities in both cases. There's historical revisionism. Both deny the reality of very well documented events, documented on social media now by smart devices. They engage in hate speech, denial of atrocities, perpetuates hatred and discrimination, of course, and anti-Semitism. The impact on the victims, of course, is very substantial. Denial undermines the experience. Think about it, 75, 70, 60 years ago, Holocaust denial, Holocaust victims would have to argue for themselves so that people would believe them. And now the same thing happens to the Noah Festival survivors, victims. And the consequence is, of course, far-reaching with social and political implications. So if people believe that October 7th was a lie, they would also believe that the Holocaust was a lie, and thus they would also believe that it is Israel or the Jews that are behind all of those conspiracies. Now, there are some ways to counter the denial. Maybe we'll discuss them later in the discussion. But I will finish this presentation with two questions. How is the Holocaust remembered today? What do you think? And how will October 7th be remembered? Now that you know about Holocaust denial, you should probably think about how October 7th is going to remember as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Lev, for this fascinating lecture. And I think we will come to the question of how to combat this development in the Q&A later. Yes, now it's my pleasure to introduce to you our last speaker, our fourth speaker today, Andreas Büttner, who is the Commissioner for Combating Antisemitism in the state of Brandenburg in Germany. He was appointed by the Parliament of Brandenburg in June 2024. This means he is the first person to hold this office, and he plays a pioneering role in shaping a comprehensive strategy to counter anti-Semitism, strengthen Holocaust remembrance, and promote Jewish life. As a former member of the state parliament in Brandenburg and state secretary, Büttner brings decades of experience in public service, education policy, and civic engagement. His work is characterized by a combination of political integrity, social empathy, and academic depth. His key areas of expertise include anti-Semitism prevention and Holocaust remembrance, which means the development of educational programs and regional alliances to strengthen civic awareness and protect Jewish communities. Then second, a dialogue and interreligious cooperation, which means promotion of partnerships between Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities and engagement with civil society and academic institutions. Third, public leadership and policy innovation, means the establishment of Brandenburg's first state-level strategy against anti-Semitism and the creation of municipal coalitions to foster democratic resilience. Andreas is the recipient of the Abraham Geiger Medal for outstanding contributions to Jewish academic life and interfaith understanding. Moreover, he initiated the so-called Municipal Alliance Against Antisemitism in Brandenburg, uniting dozens of cities and communities in joint remembrance and prevention efforts. He advocated for the constitutional inclusion of combating antisemitism and promoting Jewish life as a state objective, and represents Brandenburg in the Federal State Commission of the Antisemitism Commissioner in Germany. And he also sent me a personal note Andreas Büttner stands for a modern understanding of remembrance, one that links historical responsibility with present-day courage. He represents a Germany that does not only remember the past, but actively defends Jewish life in the present. And now, Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Verena. It's maybe a little bit too much about me. So I have to disappoint you because I have no PowerPoint presentation. The reason why is I'm not very good in doing PowerPoint presentations. It's one of my really bad attitudes, not to being able to make PowerPoint presentations. But let me talk to you a little bit about what happened after October 7 in Germany and how this is combined with Germany's Holocaust remembrance. First of all, for me, it's a real honor to speak in front of you from all over the world. And Boaz, I'm seriously really looking forward to seeing you personally in just a couple of days in Potsdam. We're really excited to hear what you have to say there. The topic that brings us together today, anti-Semitism after October 7 and Germany's Holocaust remembrance, touches the moral foundation of modern Germany. It raises a question that goes far beyond history. What has become of the words "never again," which after 1945 were meant to define the moral compass of a nation? The attacks of October 7, 2023 mark a profound rupture, not only in Israeli history, but in the moral consciousness of the Western world, especially in Germany. The massacre committed by Hamas and other jihadist groups, the murder of over 1,200 people, the abduction, rape, and torture of civilians, were not acts of isolated terror. They were the expression of a genocidal ideology, one that seeks the annihilation of Jewish life. For Germany, a country that built its post-war identity around the notion of moral responsibility for the Shoah, this day was a test, and many failed it. Only hours after the attack, demonstrations erupted in German cities, not of mourning, but of celebration. In one part of Berlin, baklava and other sweets have been openly distributed in the streets as a sign of joy for October 7. Israeli flags were burned. Slogans glorifying terror were shouted openly. And in the days that followed, Jewish citizens in Germany once again began to hide their Stars of David, to remove their mezuzot from their doors, to fear being visibly Jewish. Anti-Semitism has never disappeared, but on October 7 it came back into the light, unashamed, unmasked, and unrestrained. Since the 1980s, Germany has been regarded as a model of remembrance culture, a society that faced its own guilt, created memorials, taught its children about the Holocaust, and made working through the past a national project. This process was essential. It built democratic stability and moral reflection. Yet, remembrance is not a monument, it's a living process. As cultural theorist Aleida Assmann has written, memory is work on identity. And that work can be either constructive, when it fosters empathy and responsibility, or defensive, when it serves to confirm one's own moral innocence. Much of Germany's remembrance culture has become ritualized. We commemorate the dead Jews, but often fail to stand with the living ones. We speak about Auschwitz, yet hesitate to speak clearly about Sderot or Ashkelon. We honor history, but we avoid its consequences. And October 7 revealed the limits of this moral ritualism. It showed that remembrance, when detached from empathy and conviction, becomes a hollow gesture. Anti-Semitism is not an archaic relic. It is a flexible ideology, adaptable to changing social and political contexts, a constant variable in changing discourses, as historian Werner Bergmann aptly described it. In contemporary Germany, we encounter three dominant trends. Sorry, my dog. We need to go through that. I will go on. In contemporary Germany, we encounter three dominant trends. First, the right-wing extremist anti-Semitism, which revives classical conspiracy myths about Jewish elites, globalism, or Holocaust denial. Second, Islamist anti-Semitism, which fuses religious hatred with political anti-Zionism and sacralizes violence. Third, left-wing or post-colonial anti-Semitism, which cloaks itself in the language of human rights while denying the legitimacy of the Jewish state. The third form is particularly influential in academic and cultural institutions. It reinterprets Israel through the lens of settler colonialism, transforming the victims of history into alleged oppressors. This intellectual framing does not expand moral awareness, it distorts it. When the descendants of Holocaust survivors are accused of practicing genocide, we witness not enlightenment, but the return of a very old hatred in new academic language. Sociologist Peter Schönbach coined the term secondary anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism that arises because of the Holocaust, not despite it. Many Germans wish to distance themselves from historical guilt. They say we had nothing to do with that. This is psychology. I can speak that word in German as well, so don't worry. This is psychologically understandable, but politically and ethically, it's dangerous. From the rejection of guilt grows the rejection of responsibility. And from the rejection grows resentment against those who remind us of the past, the Jews. Commemoration, when driven by self-defense, becomes a mirror of moral fatigue. In this sense, post-war remembrance has at times become less about the victims and more about the self-image of a nation that wants to prove it has learned its lesson. In today's discourses, anti-Semitism often manifests not against individual Jews, but against Israel as the collective Jew among the nations. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition captures this mechanism precisely. Anti-Semitism includes the demonization, delegitimization, and double standards applied to the State of Israel. This definition does not prohibit criticism of Israeli policy. It simply identifies when such criticism crosses the line into hate. Yet in Germany, the debate over anti-Semitism definitions has become deeply politicized. The Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism, for example, downplays or excludes many forms of Israel-related anti-Semitism. So one of the major parties in Germany, the Left Party, which has obviously an anti-Semitic problem, just changed their definition from IRA to JDA and declared we do not have any anti-Semitism in the party, which under the IRA is clearly anti-Semitic. And for some academics, this offers moral relief. It allows them to express hostility toward Israel without confronting its anti-Semitic implications. But anti-Semitism cannot be defined without Jewish participation. A discourse that speaks about Jews, but not with them, repeats in intellectual form the very exclusion it claims to oppose. After October 7, the familiar sentence returned here in Germany, of course, what Hamas did was terrible, but. That but marks the moment when empathy ends and justification begins. It opens the space for moral relativization, for context, complexity, and other rhetorical tools used to soften the horror of anti-Semitic violence. Equating Israel with Hamas or framing terror as resistance is not nuance. It's a moral failure. The willingness of so many in Europe's intellectual circles to excuse barbarism in the name of decolonization reveals how fragile the ethical foundations of post-war memory truly are. Historian Dan Diener described Auschwitz as a civilization rupture, a break in the continuity of human reason. This understanding shaped Germany's post-war self-conception. Yet remembrance loses meaning when it turns into routine. Today, Germany's memory culture risks becoming institutionalized to the point of paralysis. Perfectly organized, emotionally detached, morally safe. People know how to remember, but not why. They visit memorials, light candles, and give speeches. Yet many fail to recognize anti-Semitism when it marches past them in the streets. After October 7, it became clear a society that remembers the Holocaust only as a history is doomed to repeat its moral blindness. The education response must go beyond repetition. We need to link historical knowledge with ethical awareness and civic courage. This means teaching the Holocaust not as a closed chapter, but as an open moral horizon. Understanding anti-Semitism is a worldview, not merely a prejudice. Encouraging dialogue with Jewish voices, rather than speaking over them. In my state, the state of Brandenburg, which is the surrounding state of the capital Berlin, we pursue this through partnership with Jewish communities, in interfaith dialogue forums, in municipal alliances against anti-Semitism, and in a lot of events we do, and I have to honor Verena in that because she always has new ideas, what events we can start and what events we can do. Such initiatives matter because remembrance without participation becomes abstraction, and education without emotion becomes sterile. The state bears responsibility to protect Jewish life, to enforce laws to support Jewish culture, but the battle against anti-Semitism cannot be won by government alone. We as the state parliament decided in the last legislature to put the combat against anti-Semitism and the protection of Jewish life into our wait, I'm searching for the word, constitution, into our constitution. Yeah, which not many of the federal states have done yet, and it's not in the federal constitution. But we did it. But what does that mean? First, it means nothing. Because just because it's in the constitution, it means nothing if we are not taking what is necessary to implement important steps in education, in the civil society, in the police, in the jurisdictional system, and also be willing to spend money for counter anti-Semitism projects. So only if we have the chance to do something, we can make what is written in the Constitution a living thing. Without that, those are just words. So we're very proud to have it in the Constitution, but now we have to go on and move on and to put a lot of things into action. That's our job, Verena's and my job, to fight for that. Democracy requires moral agency from its citizens. Media must examine the language when they single out Israel with double standards. No, when I hear in the German TV news, there was a hostage exchange between Hamas and Israel, we clearly need to speak out. No, it was not a hostage exchange. Israeli hostages have been returned to their homes, and Israel, because it was a deal, had to let go prisoners murderers and other people who were justified in prisons. Universities must confront the ideological biases that masquerade as scholarship. And politics must be willing to take clear positions, even when they are unpopular. What are they voted in for? Not to be happy with their job, with their mandate in their parliament, but to be clear, to have clear positions. Antisemitism is not a marginal issue. It is the litmus test of a democratic society's integrity. Hannah Arendt once wrote, "Understanding means reconciling ourselves to the world without condoning it." This insight defines the challenge of Holocaust remembrance after October 7. Remembrance must not become self-congratulation. It must remain an act of moral confrontation. We must learn to think of memory not as something backward-looking, but as something forward-acting. Not only never again Auschwitz, but also never again indifference. To remember the Holocaust today is to stand with Israel, not because Israel is perfect, but because it is the embodiment of Jewish self-determination in a world that once sought to eradicate it. October 7 was not a distant event, it was a mirror. It revealed how thin the layer of moral certainty in Europe has become. The slogan "never again" has been repeated so often that it risks losing substance. But its meaning is tested not at memorials. It is tested in our reactions to the suffering of Jews today in Germany and elsewhere. If Jews in Berlin must once again hide their identity, if the doors of Jews where they live, or the houses of Jews where they live, are marked with the Star of David, again in Germany, if rallies in support of Hamas take place in European capitals, if silence replaces outrage, then remembrance has failed, clearly. Holocaust memory must not serve to close a chapter, it must serve to keep the moral question open. Germany's remembrance culture will be judged not by how beautifully it mourns the past, but by how courageously it protects the present. So let me conclude. Remembrance at its core is not about guilt, it is about responsibility. It is not a monument to what has been, but a guide for what must never be again. Or as Theodor Adorno said, the demand that Auschwitz not happen again is the very first demand upon education. After October 7, this demand must be re-articulated for our time. The task of our generation is to ensure that October 7 does not become the beginning of a new chapter of silence. The Holocaust taught humanity what happens when indifference meets hatred. October 7 reminds us that hatred never dies on its own. It must be confronted, intellectually, morally, and every single day. So as Saul Friedlander said, the memory of the Shoah is not only the memory of the dead, it is a commitment to the living. And that commitment endures, and it's being tested anew today, now. Thank you for listening to my words.
Yes, thank you, Andreas, very much. Like usually, I see applause by Carolina. As usually, straight to the point. Thank you. So I suggest we start with the Q&A. I start with the first question, and maybe I put some questions together as, it's already 8 in Israel. So we start with questions to Tehila, but of course, if the other speakers want to say something, they are invited to contribute. So Tehila and others, is it according to your opinion that we have to establish research centers that will research the connection between the events of October 7 and the Holocaust? Thanks, Shmuel. Yes.
Well, it's a very difficult question that I try to avoid because, as you know, it's very, very tricky and difficult to compare between the both events. However, when I go and take testimonies from people, in many cases they mention the Holocaust. So of course we need to think about the connection, and I think that it's very obvious why Israelis and why people compare between the 7th of October to the Holocaust, because it's looked like in these days, in the day that it happened, it looked like very similar because people felt like that, and because this was their point to compare. Do I think that we need to establish a place that will research it? I don't know if we need to do something like that, but obviously we need to think, and of course we must think about this connection, and to ask ourselves why and what does it mean to do this compare between the both of events.
Okay, there is another question by Sonia, but I will ask it later because what you said maybe fits to our second speaker, Alexandra. There are so many.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, you are there. But there are so many, there's so much in the chat. What I want to ask from Tlalit, but also another one, about teaching about October 7th. Let me see. So is it I think I understand the question like this. Is it your approach, or do you call for teaching about October 7th in class while learning from the Holocaust?
It's not it's teaching this tragedy apparently bad. The idea is that questions arise, and as you know, the situation is still going on. So the question arises: is it the same? Is it different? If it is different, in what sense? Do we compare the terror survivors to the Holocaust survivors? And the idea is that if we have already programs for teaching Holocaust, if we have already teachers training programs for it, we do not have any pedagogical tools how to teach things about October 7th. So we have to think it over how to do it. And so this is what our research was. The first when it started, at first these questions and this comparison arose, how to compare these two situations. Are they the same, or the consequences and traumas are the same, and all this stuff. But after that, we have to speak about it in the classrooms. And so the question is how?
Yes.
So this is what we were trying to answer today.
Okay. So yeah, you are developing something like a curriculum or so. Because it might be a challenge when you teach about 7th of October by parallel learning from the Holocaust. This is what Talit
the parallel of tools, right? What we use, because we have to be respectful. We have to be very sensitive, because when we're talking about the Holocaust, we have decades that separate from us from the tragedy, even though we are grandchildren, great-grandchildren of the people who survived for the Holocaust. But we are people who survived through the tragedy of the October 7th. So, and we can speak to people who have relatives who were there that day, and also people who were to Gaza. So this is very, very personal story. I came from Ukraine. I've been in Israel for only 3 years. but I feel it as my personal story. And today we spend a lot of time in social networks, on Facebook, on Instagram, and I know real people who suffer from this situation, and I know real people who have their children in Gaza. My colleagues' children are now were in Gaza, so we try to come through these stories together.
Yes, thank you. So, and this is a question to Andreas from Karen A. Frankel. She's a journalist and author. She would like to know more about those who rejoiced in Germany after October 7th. Who were they? Were they ethnic Germans or immigrants?
That's a very good question. It's an alliance. Well, first of all, the first celebrations were in Berlin, in Neukölln, which is a part of Berlin, where mostly, I think mostly, people from Arab countries, Turkey, and other Near East states are living, and then they were chanting on the streets. They were distributing baklava and other sweets. But very, very fast, those left-wing anti-colonialist theory people joined them, and also people from Antifa, and so they joined them and celebrated with them on the streets. And it continued and continued. So it was an alliance of ethnical Germans and people who migrated to Germany, mostly from Arab countries and Turkey.
If I may add here, we have to remember that very early on, after 7th October, the whole, as I heard in a lecture by Dr. Michal Glatter, very early on, in all the history teachers' WhatsApp groups in Israel, they started a very strong discussion on do we teach Holocaust this year, after 7th October. And there were views, I mean, it's not the same event, but the stories are very similar. I mean, we have many similar stories: children in closets, people hiding under the bed, people, etc. We see this very strongly in the way people talk about what they saw, what they experienced. So there was a very strong discussion on this issue between teachers, and Yad Vashem very early on published a manifest explaining why there is no connection between 7th October and the Holocaust, and why we should beware of using this. But this is the whole idea is you can, as historians, we can explain, and all of us explained, I think many of the speakers, why it's not the same. But emotionally, mentally, you can't ignore the buttons dispressed in Israelis and Jews, also worldwide. I mean, you can't, any logical explanation cannot ignore what is going on in people's heads and minds and hearts. And I think I'm relating here only to the educational issue, because Verena reminded me that I'm also giving the closing remarks. But I think if we talk about education, there are similarities in the personal experience of people, also in the nature of the murderers, etc., and their tactics. But certainly it's not the same story. Still, for people whose families were in the Holocaust, who were themselves in the Holocaust, or Israelis who grew up on the Holocaust without being a part of having parents or ancestors in the Holocaust, this was very strong, and it's still very strong. So I think this is why Alexandra's work is important. The whole idea of you have to think of how you work with this in the classroom. I mean, now it's a living memory. It's very close, but but we have to also work it through with the students.
Okay, boss, thank you. So we have this question which I mentioned before. I have to go a little bit up. It's a general question by Sonia, how will we approach the question of genocide, specifically that Israel allegedly committed genocide in Gaza, which certainly deserves our attention when we examine the Holocaust on October 7th? Does anybody want to answer this?
Yes, I would like you to address this, please. Yes, so I spoke in my lecture about the terrorism denial, about a certain aspect that the other side is trying to do, and this is blame shifting. Okay, they want to shift the blame on the victim, on Israel, and thus to become the actual victim. Now, there's no dispute that there's horrible things going on in Gaza, and those who are indeed, so to speak, innocent in Gaza are, of course, suffering from Hamas and from the fight with Hamas, and by consequence of the Israeli military campaign. There's no denying it. That's one aspect. They are suffering from a war going on within their backyard. Now, having said that, I do believe that the whole media strategy and the global arc strategy of Hamas and of the those who control Hamas, actually, Iran and others, is to portray Israel as the bad guy, shift the blame, and thus delegitimize Israel. And obviously, nowadays, you can view the entire evidence yourself online. It's available. You can see all the atrocities. You can even in Israel, you can even go just a few kilometers from Gaza, sit somewhere high, and have a look and see what's going on. There's obviously no atrocities and no genocidal intent and nothing. There's just a war, indeed, a horrible war going on in trying to retrieve the hostages, now the dead hostages.
So may I add a question to you, Lev, because what I found interesting about your lecture is Hamas dual media strategy. This is very interesting because it is rarely discussed, and even, let's say, even academics fall for it. Well, for example, quoting uncritically every information which comes out of Gaza, the numbers, and while never. Just yesterday, I saw on TV a documentary about Gaza, and then I was wondering, why do they not mention the tunnels or the human shields or whatever? Because I'm connected to people from Gaza who are desperately try to find attention. So this leads to my question, actually. How do you combat this denial of 7th of October or this relativization? You know what I mean? I don't know. Yes.
Yeah, that's I think that's the question, right? The most difficult question and the most important one. How do you fight disinformation in general? So I'm gonna give you a bit of a preview now. So I just finished writing a book about AI and anti-Semitism, and in this book I discuss not only AI, but the general scope of online disinformation and anti-Semitism. And there's something called echo chambers. And those echo chambers are not just because you are in a certain group on Telegram or on WhatsApp or on Facebook and so on, but it is because of, for instance, smart AI algorithms on social media. And if you actually, and they analyze your behavior. So if you consume something, let's say that you already believe something and you saw a post about Gaza and it was anti-Zionist and so on. So, and you stalled, or you didn't scroll, you stalled on it for a few seconds. If you say a few minutes later, you will see it again because a smart AI-driven behavior-based algorithm, it's called a recommender algorithm, figured out you're interested maybe in this, and it's going to show you it again and again and again. And by the time a few days passed, right, you are already swimming in this content. So the actual technology isn't evil, it isn't bad. It just it causes the brainwashing of people. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is, of course, what's going on within the brains of people themselves. Now, if you initially supported the whatever Palestinian cause, or maybe were anti-Zionist, or maybe a bit anti-Semitic and so on, so psychologically people tend to not distract themselves, not argue with their own arguments, so to speak. Okay, they tend to be to accept whatever they already think. That's, for instance, what is going on many campuses in the US and in the EU. So people don't tend to argue with themselves or with their maybe professors or peers and friends and so on. They just, follow along, follow the trend. So that's another aspect, I would say. And you combine all of them together and you see that people are radicalizing themselves.
Okay, thank you. The next comment by Jose Bruna, I will read out. Maybe, oh, where is it? Maybe all the speakers want to respond to this. I leave it to you. So 2 years have passed since the unspeakable horrors, but we heard about them. They are speakable because Tehila is collecting testimonies, I think, of October 7th. 2 years in which Israel has waged a terrible war in Gaza, killed tens of thousands of civilians, including children, destroyed infrastructure, displaced millions of Palestinians. You are historians. I am curious, in what way do you contextualize or relate these two events with or to each other? How is it possible to speak of October 7 without addressing substantively the war to which it led? How do you relate the two in teaching?
So if I could say something on that, I am more an educator than a historian. And I think that this is where education in general has left a massive gap that historians and educators together need to address. It's true for our current situation of October 7th. It's true for the Holocaust. It's true for what I call the ugly parts of history. We have a tendency as educators, and I think probably just as society in general, to want to make it a more palpable concept. And so we engage in the use of words that downplay things. We tend to skip over parts of history because of time constrictions, or because we think our student population can't grasp it or already knows it. And this leads to lack of knowledge. And so when you say, how do we connect the atrocities of war to the atrocities of terrorism, or to the atrocities of genocide, that's what needs to take place, is that you need to contextualize things by creating a larger understanding of history in general, so that people can, whatever their age be, understand how dots actually do get connected. These things don't just happen in vacuums. And I think that we're, as a humanity, kind of reaping that lack of sowing those seeds in the past, that we haven't really taught history properly. And so we do think that these things happen in vacuums. We don't understand the history of Israel. We don't understand the history of the larger region of the Levant. We don't even know the word Levant. So, you know, these things need to be addressed in education, for the benefit of the entire region of the Middle East, but also for history in general throughout the world.
Maybe I can add something to this. It's quite difficult to get any information from Gaza which is not overloaded and, let's say, objective. So I would encourage you to listen to those Gazans who, who don't put all the blame on Israel, because these are the people who are silenced and who especially, and they blame Hamas for the war. And this is interesting because these are people I never listened to. And this, the exact people who are now are very upset and were shouting genocide for 2 years are now silent when Hamas executes its opponents. And so this is a tragedy, I think, for the people in Gaza, at least those who want peace. And I would encourage you to listen to them and not only to the official Hamas narratives. But I think, let me see, there's also a comment, but I don't find any questions, but I apologize when I forgot something. So this is the last chance to ask a question, and otherwise I will give the word to Boaz. He will say some.
I will suggest,
Verena,
Verena, you speak a bit about your work on the genocide allegation, because I mean you wrote about these discussions, and maybe you can put a link in the.
I put it.
Okay. Fine. So if you want also to add something.
My specific topic is the genocide allegation from Holocaust and genocide scholars. I put a link in it, but I would encourage all the people who are here today, if you want, I put my mail address in this in the chat. And yes, so you can approach me and I will send you everything what you need to know. And then you see how the information is put together to speak of genocide, like B'Tselem and Amnesty. And there are people out there like Norm Goda, who's here with us today, who speak against it. Jeffrey Herf is speaking against this. The study of Danny Auerbach and his colleagues is available. If you need more information, please write to me. Then I can also connect you to the Palestinians who are silenced at the moment because they are afraid to speak out, because they are attacked by other Palestinians, by lefts, because they are not fitting in the anti-Israel discourse. Yeah, so Boaz, I think.
So I would like to conclude. It was a fascinating evening and I learned a lot. It was very important and I will also relate to Professor Brunner's question in a minute, but I want to say that why we did this event, because we thought that the discourse about 7th October per se is very important. Because with all the things that happened since, people seems to, we have a feeling that people have been forgetting what this war is all about. And I think also, I was in a panel where Tehila Darmon Malka spoke, and a very important professor who I admire very much, after there was this discussion about teaching Holocaust after 7th October, he said, all these comparisons to Nazis, what is it good for? And I thought, we thought together, that of course the comparison historically is problematic, but it is good for explaining what is evil and what emerged in 7th October. It is very important to give it a name. Now, of course, I know I can explain to my students in the college why it's not the same. This is Islamistic, this is secular, this is so, this is that. I can explain, and I do explain. But we also have to call it by the right names. This is evil. There is no other way to describe the events of 7th October. The people who did it were evil. And their ideology was evil, and their practice was evil. It was different from the Holocaust, but we are talking about a whole swath of Israeli land conquered, this is the right word, conquered for maybe a day or a few less, by people who, unlike the Nazis, by the way, broadcast their atrocities as a weapon. Unlike the Nazis who were not allowing to take photos, they were broadcasting. And this evil must not be forgotten. Now, of course, I agree that what we saw in the last 2 years is a war. A war in an urban setting with civilian population. And war is hell, and I, as someone who is an historian of children, I can say war is hell, and children and civilians and children pay the price in every war in an urban setting. We can see it from World War II, bombings of Britain, of Germany, French civilians bombed out by the Allies, by the tens and thousands killed in pre-Normandy bombings, by hundreds of thousands of Japanese bombed from the sky in attacks on civilian population. By the way, we see blockade as a weapon used by the good guys in World War I, in World War II. A war is ugly. And now, war stopped now, and hopefully, not exactly since we see the news now. But it could have stopped a year ago. It could have stopped a year and a half ago. There was only one reason this war was going on, that the hostages were not liberated. Once this would have been solved, I mean, it could have been solved in a day. And a lot of people in Israel thought, we'll bomb Gaza a bit. And then I heard this from a senior officer. I did a lot of reserve duty now. And Sinwar will come out of his tunnel. We'll see what the destruction is. Say, okay, let's make a deal. But it didn't work because the Gazan leadership was willing to fight to the last Gazan civilian, child, woman, elderly, everyone. And the fact is that once it stopped, it stopped. So this could have stopped at any time. There was no major genocide plan, no major destruction plan. The destruction of Gaza neighborhoods could have stopped at the minute the hostages were rescued. That could have been liberated by Hamas. That could have been 3 months after the beginning of the war, and Gaza would have been standing and green and nice without 20,000 dead children, according to Hamas. So the fact that this war was going on with immense destruction, it's terrible. It's tragic. I'm not saying anything else. But the fact is, this is the only way the people came back home, and not all of them yet. So where are we going? I don't know. War, I think there's a big difference between this war was started on 7th October by Hamas. It could have been stopped at any time by Hamas, and it didn't until the towers started falling down in Gaza. And it's a pity, a lot of tragedy that could have been averted. So So it was important for us to talk about this. I must tell Professor Brunner, I have a course where we talk about World War II bombings. You have to explain why the Allies decided that bombing civilians is the only way they can win the war. I mean, these are the good guys, like. So the war is terrible. I have no, and it could have been averted much earlier. So I think we should finish now. I want to say thank you to the speakers again, to our new partners, Carolina and her Art of Humanity NGO, and to the new colleagues we learned to meet here. And we will upload this to the web, and you are welcome to look at it again and send it out. Thank you very much. Thank you, Verena. Thank you, Darmon, for doing the infrastructure. The whole team at Western Galilee. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
This time
Thank
from Israel.
you. Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.